Okay. Probably this week and next week, and I will be finished with the study on the Millennium. We're going to talk about worship in the Millennium this morning. Now you understand the time I'm talking about. This is after the rapture, after the tribulation. So when the rapture happens, there's still approximately 7 years left to fulfill. And then when Jesus Christ returns at his second coming, he will put into place his kingdom. And that is what we're talking about here when we talk about the millennium. And if you believe that, and I don't know why you wouldn't, and there's so much scripture to back it up, but there's a lot of them that don't. And I talked with one Wednesday night here visiting, and I told you about the resurgence of Calvinism and amillennialism. Well, he's both those things. And he couldn't have his Bible more wrong. He doesn't know how to rightly divide it. And yet he's well versed in the scriptures. He just completely messed up. And I'm sorry about that, but that's just the way it is. And if you don't believe this, I would be severely depressed. Because you know what that means? This thing's going to go on the way it's going on indefinitely. And no end to this mess. Turn to Isaiah chapter 66. Isaiah chapter 66. We're going to read last chapter of Isaiah, the last three verses, 22 to 24. Now he's talking about the millennium. He makes mention of the new heavens and new earth, but he says, as the new heavens, he says, which I will make. It hasn't happened yet. But he says, for as the new heavens and new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, neither shall the fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. So what you've got here is when the Lord comes back and institutes his kingdom, a lot of those Old Testament feasts and observances are coming back. And when they come back, he says from one new moon to another, we're going from a solar calendar back to a lunar cycle. Because he talks about one new moon to another. What's going to happen from one new moon to another? Well, all the nations are going to appear before him. And it looks like there will be 12 nations that come out of the tribulation. 12 survive out of 195 or something like that. Now, maybe there'll be some of them combined and all that. I don't know. But there will be about 12 nations. And every month, one of those nations is going to have to appear before the Lord in Jerusalem. Now, I don't know if it's every man, woman, and child. There's a verse here that I'll be reading that kind of says that. And from one Sabbath to another, there you have the Sabbath being observed again. It's not observed now. We don't have to observe it. Colossians chapter 2. But in the millennium, it'll be observed every week. And people will be observing it. The Jews will be observing it. It says, and they shall go forth and look upon, it says, shall all flesh come to worship before me. That's good. And it says, and they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of men that have transgressed against me. While you're here in Jerusalem, part of our tour package is you get to walk along the Dead Sea, which will be a lake of fire, or at least part of it will, and see the carcasses of the men, which are weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth, that transgressed against me. Talk about instilling the fear of God in anyone that comes there, but that's what it says. Now, you may think that's awful, but God knows how to keep people in line, and he's going to do it for 1,000 years. And one of the things is, I know, the love of God, and there'll be plenty of that, but if there's no love, if the love of God doesn't persuade you, the fear of God will take you over. Because when you see this, it's going to be the one place. And there's still people that get thrown into this lake of fire. Who would be stupid enough? But What was it? Forrest Gump said, stupid is what stupid does. Wisdom for the ages right there. It says, for their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be abhorring unto all flesh. So you got mandatory visits to Jerusalem to worship the Son. The fact that there are 12 tribes, 12 months, and 12 nations. There'll probably be 12 different gates that go. See, this is all a mini picture of eternity with the New Jerusalem. It's very, very similar. So you're going to have the 12 apostles judging the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes are going to be judging the 12 nations. And there'll probably be 12 gates going in to that city, and each gate will be for a different nation. Just like in eternity, New Jerusalem has 12 entrances for the 12 nations. So, and of course, hopefully in eternity, the guided tour of the lake of fire is not necessary. So you got Sabbath observances, lunar observances, lunar calendar, and then we'll talk a little bit in a minute here about the Feast of Tabernacles, where they all have to show up. Now, I don't know how that's going to work. All the nations are represented, the kings possibly, but we'll see. In Isaiah, turn to Isaiah chapter 2. Isaiah chapter 2. Verse 1 to 5. Now you got to remember, everything that man has ever been working toward, a utopia, Jesus Christ will bring that in. Everything from clean water and clean air and plenty of food and plenty of jobs and, plenty of everything. Even healing. You can't ask for more than that. He's going to give them just about everything they could ever want. The problem is that men still have sinful hearts. And what we see from the millennium is no matter what they're given, no matter how much they're given, no matter how much they're loved and cared for, men will sin against God, and the devil's bound in the bottomless pit. He's not the cause of it. Look at this, and this is just another verse that talks about how the nations are going to be going to Jerusalem. Isaiah 2, verse 1, the word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. There it is. Talk about, what the United Nations claims now, Jerusalem will be. It says, and many people shall go and say, come ye and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. That'll be your vacation for the year. You won't find a greater place on earth to go, or a greater person to meet. Let us go. Thank God we'll already be there. Let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. That's because he is physically there. So this stuff about a spiritual coming of Christ, and that the Jehovah's Witnesses talk about, and the post-millennialists and the amillennialists, that he's not actually here, but the church is bringing the kingdom, is a bunch of lies. The king is here, seated on a throne in Jerusalem, probably on the Temple Mount there. It says, and he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. That tells you that there's going to be a lot of farming going on. And there's going to be a lot of conversion of tools that are made for war are going to be beat into something that can be used to till the ground. That's what we're working toward, right? That's what's on the United Nations building, yet they can't bring it in. I think they've brought about 80 different wars in the last, since their inception. They've been responsible for about 80 different wars. Well, Jesus Christ brings it in one day. He just wipes out all the armies of this earth, and it says, well, that's it. No more war for 1,000 years. It's pretty nice. Can you imagine peace for 1,000 years, not to worry about somebody coming and killing you? Or taking what you have, or raping your women, or killing your children, killing your sons in war? Can you imagine 1,000 years of that? Man, the population it's going to be an explosion. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. O house of Jacob, come ye, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. Man, that sounds good to me. Turn to Zechariah chapter 8. Zechariah chapter 8, look at verse 23. I need to get over there. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Now, notice it says 10 men from 10 different nations, or from the nations, from 10 different languages. And what they're doing is that Jew is so important that you need him to go before the Lord. That's why Deuteronomy, I believe it's Deuteronomy 6, I think that's it, talks about Israel being a priest nation, a nation of priests, because you need them to intercede and advocate for you. So 10 men will grab a hold of one Jew and says, okay, take us in, because you're not going in his presence without him. You see how God just turned the whole world around on its head? Where that Jew right now is, he's hated. We're about the only nation that supports him at all now. Every nation on this earth hates him. Some nations have put their hand against him again. France is one of them.
The Gentiles don't like it because they can make money.
Yes. They've got some blessings on them that makes the Gentiles jealous, and we have some blessings on us that makes them jealous, on the church, I should say. I was thinking of something this morning, and it's beyond this study. But I got thinking, after the millennium, let's say at the end of 1,000 years, let's say there's 100 billion people. 100 billion people that have been saved, or that are saved, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. But then in eternity, the birth rate, there is no death rate, there is no mortality. So it just exponentially just keeps. Do you realize that 1,000,000 years from now, you'll be one of the rarest individuals in the universe? You'll be one of a vast few, or a very few, I should say, not a vast few, but a very few that have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. In fact, you will be one of those that experienced death, pain, suffering, taxes, that nobody else in that is existing will have experienced. You will know of a time when there was horror on this earth, where we saw, I know what we are. We are a witness throughout all eternity of what sin can do, because we're going to tell the story. There will be a time when you'll be the only person in an entire galaxy that was redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, that has the story of what happened, because Jesus Christ always bears the marks of that passion. He always bears the marks of that cross. So everybody's always going to ask about those marks. And somebody's going to tell them. You think about that. That's why the Bible says it's not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Because I understand, so God put you over 10 cities. So what? But 10 cities will become 10 galaxies with billions of planets in each one. It is inevitable. Y'all see that? Or am I just you think I'm doing a sci-fi thing on you? I'm not. Of the end of his government, there was no end. We become a minority, but we become that final witness of what sin did when it happened. and why it should never, ever happen again. Y'all see that? I mean, for somebody that's never experienced pain, it says there'll be no more pain, no more death. But we know what it is. We've been to funerals. We may experience it ourselves. We know what disease is. We know what pain is. And they'll have never experienced any of that. But that was a result of sin, wasn't it? The wages of sin is death. Anyway, I thought, man, we're going to be rare. Okay. Turn to Zechariah chapter 14. And there's one particular feast in the year that the Lord wants to bring folks to come up and worship before the king. Now, I don't know if it's just the representatives. It kind of infers it might be all of them. I don't know how they'll do that, but they'll do it. Zechariah chapter 14. Remember, the Feast of Tabernacles pictures two different pictures of first and second Advent. God tabernacling in the flesh. So that's going to be his birth and death, the fact that his first and second coming are commemorated through the Feast of Tabernacles. And it's going to be commemorated forever, or at least for 1,000 years. It says, Zechariah 14, verse 16, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem, that means if they've survived the tribulation, which, you know, you're probably not talking one out of 8 people, shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Now here's what happens if they don't. It shall be that whosoever will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. So the first thing, I mean, here we're talking about rebellion in the millennium. Rebellion from a nation or a family that refuses to go up, and God says, okay, if you won't come up, I'll cut off your water. It won't rain over your particular country. And if that doesn't work, and he says, and if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, in other words, he's already taken the rain from them, there shall be the plague. Now, when he says the plague, man, I don't know what he's talking about there, but the plague in the Bible, Zechariah chapter Numbers chapter 13, I think so, is leprosy. The plague. You certainly don't want that one. It says, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Pretty clear, isn't it? They better show. With bells on, man. And don't come without a gift. And I imagine that all the nations will be tributary to the Jew in Jerusalem, so you're going to be owing some tax money to them. Now, if you think that's unfair, you just read the history of the Jews. You've never seen a more persecuted people. You've never seen more atrocities and horror that have happened to one group of people in all your life. And there's verses in the Bible, the Lord said He says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. He's going to repay certain nations for their treatment of that Jew. It's not pretty. He said he'll rule them with a rod of iron. In fact, we're going to read that. Look at Psalms chapter 2. By the way, that Feast of Tabernacles is in September, October. That they'll have to come up and worship. All right, he says in Psalm chapter 2, verse 8, he says, ask of me, this is the Father speaking to the Son, ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the othermost parts of the earth for thy possession. And then he says, thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. And then now here's the warning. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. This is that, the Bible says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, talking about for it is God which worketh in you. I don't think we tremble all that much. I've trembled a few times at the thought of His Word, the thought of the things He can do, but there'll be some trembling. Brother, when you're in His presence, you're going to tremble. And people are going to, it says, serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Look what it says, kiss the Son lest He be angry, and ye perished from the way, when His wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in Him. In other words, you better not have an attitude when you come before the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, I'm not talking about us. You understand that. I'm talking about anyone that's surviving the tribulation, that go into the millennium, and then those that are born in the millennium. I think I mentioned this last week. It's like the difference between someone that was born or that lived during the Depression versus someone that didn't live during the Depression. That one that lived during the Depression is probably a hoarder. And they're going to try to keep a hold of everything and make use of everything that they have. And they'll have a garden out every year, maybe they don't even need to have one. Maybe they don't have to have one. Maybe they can afford to go buy everything they want, yet they'll have that garden out. They'll pinch pennies and they'll save money like nobody's business. Why? They've lived through a time of depression. And then there's the kids that are born after that. We just waste everything. Spend. Rack it up. Coal, plastic. To where we're just got this load of debt on us. You can tell we didn't come out of the depression. Or we know what it is to have lack, but all we know how to do is spend. Well, the same thing in the millennium. They didn't see 4 billion people die. They didn't see the entire earth practically on fire. They didn't see the Antichrist and the mark of the beast and hunting people down and killing people for not taking it. They didn't see that. They didn't see all the judgments of God. All they saw was, everything looks good now. Clean air, clean water, plenty of jobs, plenty of food. Man, this is utopia. I just don't like somebody telling me what to do. Why should somebody be able to tell me what to do? I mean, am I not my own person? I mean, it is all about me, right? That's how folks are. Absolutely oblivious that God created them, and He created them for His own pleasure to please Him, not to please themselves. So they go about to please themselves. They just don't like authority. The whole book's about that. It's about authority. From beginning to end. Who's going to run you? Who are you going to let run you? There's somebody running me right now. That's the Lord. And if He's not running me, it's a mess. Believe me, it's a mess. All right, let's look at conditions on the earth in the millennium. Turn to Genesis chapter 3. Let's look at the curse to begin with. In Genesis 3:17-19, He says, and unto Adam He said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake, in sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. And this is where I've got wounds on my hands and my feet. Thorns and thistles. I'm always getting scratched with something on my property. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face, this is where sweating shows up in the Bible. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread till thou return into the ground. For out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. So God cursed the ground. Where do you get your food from? Now you know why you're going to die. Yep. Always good to bless your food. Why? There's a curse on it. Why? It came from the ground. So the animals eat from the ground, they're cursed. Men eat from the ground, they're cursed. No matter how good your diet is, you're still going to die. If the Lord tarries. Amen? You're just going to die. Turn to Isaiah chapter 11. Now we got to take these kind of like one at a time of different things that are going to take place. And this one to me is remarkable. You know, as easily as the Lord put the curse on the ground, He can take the curse off. And I'm not going to say that the entire curse is removed, because it does not appear that that all of it has, because death still happens in the millennium. So that part of it hasn't been taken away, but something else is restored. But let's look at this one first. Isaiah chapter 11, starting at verse 4. He says, "But with righteousness shall He judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth, and He shall smite the earth with the rod of His mouth, and with the breath of His lips shall He slay the wicked." Second advent. "And righteousness shall be the girdle of His loins, and faithfulness the girdle of His reins." And then it says, "The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them." When have you seen that lately? When have you seen a child leading around a wolf, a leopard, or a lion? Now, I'm not talking about a cub. I'm talking about even some domestic cat. I'm talking about a wild animal. It's a little child, just lead them around. That brings up all kinds of things in your, I think a tiger is one of the most beautiful creatures God ever created. Not one that you can pet. Not without taking your entire arm off. But can you imagine a kid getting a tiger a real tiger for Christmas? Well, it won't be Christmas. For tabernacles. Son, we finally got you that tiger you wanted. And, and here's this big old thing with, teeth 3 inches long, but it wouldn't dare. In fact, it might not even have the teeth like that anymore. It might have, like our molars for chewing straw or hay. We'll find out that they'll eat grass just like the ox. Can you imagine that, though, being able to just jump on this thing, play with it, ride around the yard? Wouldn't dare hurt you. You do that now, man, you'll be absent one kid, maybe several if you got them. He'll eat them up. Look, it says, verse 7, "The cow and the bear shall feed." When Dad brings home a teddy bear, it's a real bear. It says, "The young ones shall lie down together." And listen, kids have always imagined that. Don't the animals look cuddly to you? You see a big old bear, man, you just think, man, he's just like he's cuddly, but he's not. He's deadly. Well, maybe God made him cuddly to begin with. Maybe that, when Adam named all the critters, they were just that, cuddly. And harmless. No fleas neither. "The cow and the bear shall feed, and their young ones shall lie down together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox." See, God can change that nature back to what it was before the fall. He can do that. And by the way, you're worried about something on the endangered species list, like it's going to. Don't worry about that. God remembers how He created it. I don't worry a bit about that. If I worried about that, then I would be devastated at what happens in the tribulation. He kills all the fish in the ocean. All of them. I'll show you the passage where He brings them back. God didn't lose the blueprints for recreating something. It's not a problem for Him to bring back whatever He wants to bring back. So if you're worried about the dodo bird, you might own one in the millennium. I don't worry about those things. You know what I worry about? The souls of men, because they're eternal. That's what we're to be concerned about. It said, "The lion shall eat straw like the ox," changes his nature, "and the sucking child shall play on the hole of an asp." We're talking about a 1-year-old that's on top of a snake's den. And it's a viper. It wouldn't dare. Why? He said it's not going to hurt anybody. He said, and the weaned child shall put his hand on a cockatrice's den. You got a 3-year-old playing around with a snake, taking it and slinging it, but it won't bite. Why? Because God told it not to. And that's just it. It's amazing. If we would just do what the animals do what they're told, we don't. We don't. I'm not about Christians. We don't. Everything else in creation obeys His word except us, the unsaved. Look at Isaiah 65. I think it's going to be an exciting time. Maybe for some folks it'll be drudgery to them. I don't know why they hate the Lord so bad, but I'm just going to have myself a time. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to get me a lion, a leopard, and a bear. Yeah, at least those three. Isaiah 65, look at verse 25. Here it is again, just in case you think this is, maybe the first one was we had to spiritualize. It says, the wolf and the lamb shall feed together, the lion shall eat straw like the bullock, and dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, saith the Lord. So I think one may be that all over the world, and I don't know how extensive this will be, but I don't have any reason to believe it won't be out throughout the whole world, where He's going to remove that curse off the animal and give them a different nature than what they have right now, because right now they're deadly dangerous. Look at Amos chapter 9. Isn't this what man wants? We want to protect all the animals. We want all the animals to be at peace with man, and you don't want anybody wearing fur coats, right? Look at this. Amos 9:13. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper. Can you imagine, you got a tractor going down a road, and you got a bunch of people just reaping as fast as they can, that's how these growing season, harvesting seasons are going to run, almost continuously. There'll be so much food, there'll be no problem, man, with food. You're talking at least, you could be talking four different four different harvests a year or more. Considering that there's a verse that talks about the sun being 7 times brighter. That means a thicker atmosphere, but that means a greenhouse effect to where we could be growing it could be once a month on some things. It says, the treader of grapes, and the treader of grapes, him that soweth seed, and the mountains shall drop sweet wine, and all the hills shall melt. There is just an abundance of food and drink. He talks there about the new wine that comes from the grape, squeezed from the grape. You don't have to worry about anybody starving to death. There won't be a place on this earth where food won't grow. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that what we're working toward, the war on poverty? Where everybody eats? Isn't that what we wanted? Jesus Christ, He accomplishes that. We've never accomplished it, not one time. Not one time in history, any time in history. How about Isaiah 65, verse 20? That wasn't enough. If you lived to be 75, and those are years of peace where you didn't have to worry about something killing your children. Not disease, not an animal, not a human, not war. If you only live 75 years, it'd be worth it. But He gives longevity of life. Isaiah 65:20, there shall no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days, for the child shall die 100 years old. That means at 100, you're still considered a child. Now, I think you're fully grown. You're just in your youth. But the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. In other words, there are folks that transgress during that time, they'll wind up in a lake of fire, but it says a child died at 100 years old. If you look at the longevity, Methuselah lived the longest. And Methuselah was 969 years old. And I think Adam was 950, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in there. You imagine living that long? I mean, I'm 50, I'll be 59 this year, and I'm ready to throw in the towel. Well, in the millennium, I'm just a young child. That's not to say you stay young that long, but he's just saying, look, child died at 100 years old. I mean, still considered young, very young. You die at 100 now, the last thing is going to call you is young. Okay? Old as coal, Methuselah, that's what but that longevity will be restored. And that I get to thinking about that. And here's somebody going into the millennium will not be alive at the end of it. I'm not talking about us. We have eternal life, immortal life. But someone that has survived the tribulation of the nations that goes into the millennium will not survive to the end. Why? Because that's that part of the curse that is not gone. And they are not going to make it one day. And one day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. So, what you have at the end are those that did not see the tribulation, did not see the destruction, did not see what the devil did. And they're the ones that are deceived at the end when the devil is loosed from the pit for a season. It starts making sense when you start thinking it through of what happens. Because I'm thinking, who would be deceived by the devil after seeing what happened at Armageddon? But they are. Why? Because the ones that are there aren't the ones that witnessed it. But you're the same stripe. That's what Jesus said. He says, you garnish the sepulchres of the fathers. He goes, it was your fathers that killed them. And you're just like them. But you say, well, if we had lived back there, we wouldn't have done that. That's just like a sinner saying, or even a Christian saying, well, if I had lived back then, I never would have called for Jesus Christ's crucifixion. Yeah, you would have. Why? We're all the same stripe. We'd have done it. You might have been Peter. You might have denied him 3 times, or Thomas and doubted his resurrection. There's something. Listen, or maybe you're John and James and want to call down fire on people who haven't burned up. I think that's who my relatives are. Because I think about, should we call down fire on them, Lord? He said, you know not what spirit you're of. Let's burn them up, Lord. Turn to Ezekiel 47. This will be the last one we cover. It's quite long, but I don't need to read all that. It runs from Ezekiel 47, 2 to 12. We don't need to read all of it. What this is when, and this, you got to remember, it's a mini picture of what's going to happen in eternity. In eternity, you have New Jerusalem coming down. You do not have New Jerusalem coming down in the millennium. In New Jerusalem, there's water that comes forth from the throne. That's the water of life. There's going to be water that issues from his throne at Jerusalem on this earth. Now, that water is not the water of life that gives eternal life, because that's not till eternity, or not till the new heaven and new earth. But this water heals the other waterways. So the minute it hits any other stream or river or ocean or whatever, it begins to heal it. Okay? And that's basically what it's talking about from verse 2. It says, Then brought he me out of the way of the gate northward, and led me about the way without unto the utter gate, by the way that looketh eastward. And behold, there ran out waters on the right side. And when the men that had the line in his hand went forth eastward, he measured 1,000 cubits, and he brought me through the waters, and the waters were to the ankles. And he keeps going on there, and it keeps coming up. It comes up to the knees and then to the loins. And verse 5, afterward he measured 1,000, and it was a river that I could not pass over, for the waters were risen, waters to swim in, clean enough to swim in. A river that could not be passed over. And he said unto me, Son of man, hast thou seen this? Then he brought me and caused me to return to the brink of the river. Now when I had returned, behold, the bank of the river were very many trees on one side and on the other. Now there's only one tree, that's the tree of life. Here there are many trees on one side of on the other. Then said he unto me, These waters issued out toward the east country, and go down into the desert, and go into the sea, which being brought forth into the sea, the waters shall be healed. Isn't that what you wanted? No water pollution? And it shall come to pass that everything that liveth, which moveth whithersoever the river shall come, shall live, and there shall be a very great multitude of fish. Well, he killed all the fish in the oceans. Now we got them coming back. Because these waters shall come thither, for they shall be healed, and everything shall live whither the river cometh. And it shall come to pass that the fishers shall stand upon it from Engedi unto Neglaim. I don't know how you pronounce that. Anybody got an idea? Neglaim. And they shall be a place to spread forth nets. Their fish shall be according to their kinds, as the fish of the great sea, exceeding many. But he talks about some places that are not going to be healed. But the miry places thereof, the marshes thereof shall not be healed. They shall be given to salt. It's probably talking about the Dead Sea area, which will be a lake of fire. And by the river upon the bank thereof, and on this side and on that side, shall grow all trees for meat, whose leaf shall not fade, neither shall the fruit thereof be consumed. It shall bring forth new fruit according to his months, because their waters they issued out of the sanctuary, and the fruit thereof shall be for meat, and the leaf thereof for medicine. It talks about the leaves of the tree of life are for the healing of the nations. Again, you have a slight picture, differentiate between the two. Zechariah 14, verse 8, let me read this to you. And it shall come to pass, or it shall be in that day, that living water shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one. Okay? All right, we're going to have to stop there, and we'll finish it up next week. Got a few more things that take place about the desert, those afflicted with ailments and some other things. But you can see the Lord's going to, what man has been trying to work toward, that the Ocasio, whatever her name is, that wants to spend $1 gazillion trying to accomplish, the Lord accomplishes in a couple days. Very short period of time. And that just goes to show you that this world cannot bring in utopia. They can only make it worse. Because the issue is sin. And until that sin's dealt with, until the Lord comes back, don't expect any peace and don't expect things to get better. If they do get better, thank God for it, because they're going to get worse again. Okay. Looking forward to the millennium, aren't you? All right. Any questions?